So, we now come to the backbench debate on support for childcare and the early years. Mr Robin Walker to move.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm very grateful to the Backbench Business Committee for securing this early debate in the parliamentary sitting for this debate and for allowing the Education Select Committee to continue its work on this vital area of policy. I'm also grateful to my honourable friend for Aldridge Brownhills recognising the pressure on parliamentary time today for having withdrawn her equally very important debate, and I hope she secures another one on that subject. When I ran to be chairman of the Education Select Committee, I proposed an inquiry into early education and childcare, and I was very glad to get the support of a substantial majority across the whole House, as well as of individual members of the committee, in pursuing this. As a parent of a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old myself, I should perhaps declare a special personal interest in this area. But there is probably no single subject more vital to the future success of our children than their earliest experiences of education, the stimulation, engagement and support they can receive through high-quality early years education and childcare. As many others have argued, there is enormous economic benefit from investment in this space. The last time I troubled the Backbench Business Committee for time to debate it was in advance of the last budget, when I was very glad that the Treasury accepted the case for major new financial commitments in this area. I said then that an investment in childcare and early education would benefit multiple groups: parents who wish to work, schools to have properly socialised children ready to learn, children who benefit from better stimulation, and those with special educational needs with earlier identification, a win to the power of 4. Our inquiry was launched before the very significant expansion in the government's childcare offer and its plans for substantially increasing investment in the funded hours. But it's important to note that our oral evidence was taken both before and after the detail of these announcements became known. We heard both the relief of the sector at the scale of the commitment being made, but also many of its ongoing concerns with the complexity of the many schemes of funding, the overall level of funding going into childcare, particularly for 3- and 4-year-olds, and the many serious and ongoing pressures facing providers. I'm enormously grateful for the many expert witnesses, parents, providers, academics, campaigners, childminders and nursery practitioners who gave us evidence. Indeed, it is worth noting that this inquiry received more written submissions than any other in the life of my Select Committee, and that so far as my clerks recall, than any other inquiry in the history of the Education Select Committee. I want to put on record my thanks to the clerks of the committee and our apprentice, who had to handle an unprecedented quantity of material with calm determination and expertise. Due to the very important list of other debates that have taken place today, I won't have time to re-present every one of the 21 recommendations that we made in the report on the back of those more than 10,000 pieces of evidence, but I do want to remind the Minister of the pressing nature of the challenge reflected in the enormous public response to our call for evidence. And I want to focus really on 3 key recommendations. Affordability of childcare is a key concern for parents, and before the budget it was becoming clear that the sector was facing a crisis, both of affordability and availability. I have no doubt that the additional hundreds of millions in funding this year and next will make some difference to that, and that the rollout of funded hours for the under 3s over the next few years will make a big difference for working parents. But I would urge the Government to consider very carefully our recommendations 6, 8 and 11 in this regard, as well as our overarching recommendations 1 and 2 on the need to work across government to ensure adequate funding. The additional billions that the Government has committed over the long term will only succeed if the sector is properly supported in the short and medium term, and if we continue to have a strong and thriving early years education sector across public, private and voluntary sectors. I know that the Department for Education alone will not be able to make decisions on taxation, but I would urge my honourable friend on the front bench to consider very carefully the case for our recommendation on exempting childcare providers from business rates and the payment of VAT on their building costs. Not only are these taxes a false economy for the Treasury, as the DfE's own evidence admits that these costs have to be taken into account in the funding rates for these settings, but they're a barrier to much-needed expansion to meet the government's own ambitions. Worse than that, many childcare businesses pointed out to the committee that the size of their premises is not a matter of choice, but a matter of meeting regulatory standards, themselves the requirement of government and Ofsted guidelines. They therefore find themselves having to pay more in business rates, not as a result of any commercial decision to expand, but as a result of wishing to meet the space standards set by public bodies. I raised the pressing concerns of nurseries about rapidly increasing business rates bills in a previous debate, but as our unanimous recommendation suggests, fixing this problem and creating a level playing field amongst providers when it comes to rates and VAT should not be used as a cost-saving measure. It should be used to ensure that more resources are available for paying, upskilling and retaining expert staff. In support of this recommendation, written evidence from the National Education Union said that business rates for nursery-age schools can be over 100,000 in some areas, so the absence of a rebate is a significant pressure on already overstretched budgets. Written evidence from the National Day Nurseries Association said business rate property revaluation from April 2023 has seen providers report bill increases of 40 to 50%. And in a survey of NDNA members, 782 nurseries across England were asked what they would do if they no longer had to pay business rates. 61% said they would increase staff salaries, 49% said they would reduce losses in their business, and 40% that they would mitigate fee increases to parents. If affordability and quality are as important to the government as availability, then I believe they should take account of this evidence, and I urge my honourable friend, who I know is passionate about social mobility and the benefits of early education, to ensure that continues to be pressed with the Treasury. In terms of the benefits to parents, we've heard strong arguments from the Treasury themselves about the benefits to parents of being able to work where they have affordable childcare provided. This has been a key rationale of the expansion of so-called free hours. What we have recommended should be called funded hours down the age groups. It was a key rationale behind the very welcome changes to childcare provision for universal credit. However, in that context, I urge the Minister to press his Treasury colleagues on our recommendation 11 for a fundamental review of the tax-free childcare system to improve both understanding and uptake. Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs tax-free childcare report and survey in 2021 found that 43% of people found the name confusing or unclear. 58% of these said it prevented them from looking into tax-free childcare, and 54% said it prevented them from signing up to the scheme. The Institution of Fiscal Studies said that in the 4 years after introducing tax-free childcare, the government spent £2.3 billion less on the scheme than it had planned. And in written evidence that we received from parents, they said that the tax-free childcare system is confusing and onerous to use and complicated to calculate. Childminders told us that not enough parents know about tax-free childcare, especially not the self-employed. Many parents also find it difficult to set up the payments. My biggest disappointment with the announcements made at the budget was that the tax-free childcare system wasn't touched, and yet we know that the theoretical benefits of this policy aren't reaching a very substantial proportion of the parents it was designed to help. Worse, in answer to my own written parliamentary questions, we've seen that even those people who've gone to the trouble of registering or re-registering for support through the current cumbersome system, only around half of them actually claim anything from it. And that doesn't suggest a system living up to its promise. The Select Committee made a number of other suggestions for supporting affordability for parents, not least our call in Recommendation 13 for better support for stay-at-home parents. The last area I want to press particularly hard with my colleague on the front bench is the logic of our recommendation on offering funded support to parents in training or study. The logic of this is that elsewhere across education policy, the government is going out of its way to encourage people to upskill, supporting lifelong learning and investing in the long-term productivity of our country by ensuring people are better skilled. It is therefore counterproductive to disincentivise parents from pursuing higher qualifications by making 30 hours childcare available only to working families on a particular income and explicitly not to those in study. The recent All-Party Group for Students report on the cost of living and its impact on students highlighted the severe challenges facing parents in study, and addressing this as part of our Recommendation 18 would make a massive difference for this group of parents. Supporting the workforce, expanding family hubs, not just in some areas but across the whole country, expanding the early years pupil premium and investing in early intervention and training to identify and meet special educational needs are amongst other key recommendations of our report. Mr Deputy Speaker, I could speak passionately in favour of every single one of our key recommendations, and I look forward, when the Select Committee meets tomorrow, to the detailed consideration of the Government's response. But I know that so many others want to speak in this debate. Can I end by commending the whole report of my committee to the Minister. Having served in government, I appreciate he may not be able to accept every one of our recommendations straight away, but I hope he will recognise the weight of evidence that sits behind them, the incredible importance of getting policy in this area right, and the immense value of continuing to invest in our children. Our Prime Minister has described education as the closest thing we have to a silver bullet in improving productivity. I welcome his commitment to making education the main funding priority in every spending review, and early years education needs to be at the forefront of that. I know, having worked with my honourable friend for Wantage over a number of years, how passionate he is on evidence-based policy to improve life chances for children, on closing the attainment gap and tackling disadvantage. There can be no greater impact on each of those than investing effectively in early years. I'm hugely grateful to colleagues from across the House who supported this debate, and I'm delighted to see we have a maiden speech to look forward to from one of the House's newest members. I commend this report and this debate to my honourable friend.
The question is, as on the order paper, I'd like to remind members that this is a maiden speech. There will be no interruptions. Keir Mather.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to firstly thank the Honourable Member for Worcester for securing this important debate on support for childcare and the early years. In my constituency of Selby and Ainsty, enormous challenges exist for children who have additional needs and who sit at that critical juncture between the early years and Key Stage 1. One reason for this is the failure to build an SEND school for the Selby area constituency, despite DFE funding being allocated since 2019. This forces parents to make an impossible choice. They can place their children in mainstream schools which don't suit their needs, educate them at home with little support, or have them travel for hours a day to attend schools in Harrogate or Scarborough. This outrageous situation cannot continue, and as Selby and Ainsley's Member of Parliament, I will fight tirelessly for spades in the ground to provide the SEND school these children so desperately need. Now, if you'll permit me, Mr. Speaker, I would like to begin my maiden speech by telling honourable members about my beautiful constituency of Selby and Ainsty. But before I do so, I too would like to condemn the barbaric attack by Hamas terrorists against Israel last week and send my profound condolences and personal solidarity to all innocent civilians caught in the terrible violence that has engulfed Israel and Palestine. I would also like to take a moment to welcome another new member to their place, my honourable friend, the member for Rutherglen and Hamilton West. A person of integrity and intelligence who I greatly look forward to working alongside as we learn to navigate this formidable place together and show our constituents the difference that a hard-working Labour MP can make. Mr. Speaker, people in my constituency of Selby and Ainsty represent the best of Yorkshire. They are community-oriented but personally resilient, hopeful and proud but grounded and pragmatic, willing to give you a fair hearing but never afraid to speak truth to power. And it's this independent-minded outlook which I believe explains the most exciting political moments in our area's past, because I am not the first by-election candidate to cause a national upset in our part of the world. Back in 1905, Selby residents, much like their modern compatriots, had suffered through over 10 years of Conservative government. Britain languished under the rule of an unelected Prime Minister, Arthur Balfour, too weak to govern and too lacking in authority to lead a broken Tory party, divided, unsurprisingly, by Britain's trading relationship with the outside world. The residents of Selby looked at this Tory melodrama and said enough, using a by-election to send a Liberal, Joseph Andrews, to represent them. Now, I am proud, Mr. Speaker, that some 118 years later, local people in Selby have not lost the defiant spirit of their forebears, this time voting Labour for a brighter future for their community. Now, in modern times, the Selby constituency has mirrored the national picture, remaining Labour from 1997 to 2010, before being Tory-held from 2010 to now. And I would like to take a moment to talk about my predecessors. My immediate predecessor is Nigel Adams, who had the privilege of representing the seat where he was raised and educated. Mr. Adams deserves credit for his support for local charities such as Selby Hands of Hope and his work to secure funding for Tadcaster's flood alleviation scheme. In his maiden speech, he said there was no greater honour, privilege or responsibility than representing Selby and Ainsty. I echo those sentiments and I thank him for his contribution. I now turn to Mr. John Grogan, who began the tradition of Labour MPs representing the Selby area. John and I both fought our first elections in Selby as younger men, myself at 25 and John at 26, though I am pleased to say I had a little more luck on my first attempt. And I can only hope that those similarities continue from here, as John's achievements for our area were phenomenal. He secured the Selby bypass, oversaw the creation of modern flood defences and achieved funding for Selby War Memorial Hospital, a pillar of our community upon which so many continue to rely. John was an empathetic and tenacious constituency MP and will be so again when he returns to this place at the next election. Mr. Speaker, Selby and Ainsty is a vast rural constituency with no one single centre of gravity. Instead, ancient patterns of agriculture, river trade and commerce have created a complex tapestry of villages and towns, each with its own unique attributes. Selby itself has always been on the national map, passing the centuries under the shadow of our magnificent 11th century abbey as a prosperous market town. It played its part in the Industrial Revolution with a thriving shipbuilding industry, and in recent times boasted the largest coalfield in Europe, powering Britain for decades through the hard graft of ex-mine workers and their families, whose interests I look forward to defending and advancing. But it's also clear that our town has a bright future ahead. As a regional tourism centre, an emerging hub for doing business, and in its continuing role as Great Britain's energy epicentre. To the west of Selby lies Sherburn in Elmet, a town fired by community spirit and people determined to, in the best Yorkshire sense of the phrase, just get on with it. The place is powered by fantastic community groups like We Are Sherburn, the Old Girls' School, Elmet Lions, and the annual Scrappers Cup, stewarded by fantastic local leaders. To the north lies Tadcaster and its surrounding villages. Now, Tad is a brewing town with formidable heritage, and those members who enjoy a Madry, a John Smith's, a Foster's, or even a Nuki Brown are likely sampling the produce from this beautiful part of North Yorkshire. But like so many other northern villages and towns, the success of communities in my constituency has been in spite of a government which has consistently failed to get the basics right. In our part of North Yorkshire, it's hard to stay healthy when a GP appointment or a timely ambulance is a thing of the past, and when dental provision is so poor that one resident told me she'd had to pull out one of her own daughter's teeth. It's hard to keep your head above water when average mortgage payments in our area have increased by thousands a year, and when those trying to build a life on new build estates are fleeced by the very companies who are meant to provide them with a decent place to live. It's hard to get on as a region when broken bus networks isolate the elderly, stop people getting to work, stifle small businesses, and cut us off from the outside world. Now, I have no doubt about our future success, but local people know we deserve better than what we are forced to settle for now. That hope for a fairer future is what I will fight for every single day that I am in this place, and I am grateful that constituents have provided me with this opportunity to serve. Because for me, the need to right these systemic wrongs isn't just about productivity, health outcomes, pounds and pence. It's about values, Labour values. The conviction that residents in Selby and Ainsty have a right as British citizens, not just to survive, but to realise their full potential, to live decent, happy and fulfilled lives which allow them and their families to flourish. I hold these convictions not only as a Labour Member of Parliament, but as somebody who is deeply patriotic, who believes that Britain should lead the world and set an example for what it means for the government to serve its citizens. And that belief in progressive patriotism is defined by my experience as a young person. I am the first Member of Parliament to have been born after the last Labour government took power in 1997, and I know some members may want to close their ears at that fact. But it does mean I have grown up in a world destabilised by the technological revolution, climate crisis and war, and I will live through a century of unparalleled global upheaval. In the face of these challenges, myself and other young people believe that Britain has a duty to become a leader again. When globalisation has failed to solve challenges like the climate crisis, British business and British workers must lead the world in securing green prosperity and winning the race to net zero. When the age of peace on the European mainland is over and America's ability to provide stability is in question, the UK must lead in NATO, support our European partners, and enhance our armed services' ability to defend our interests. And when democratic ideals are threatened, either by autocratic regimes or the destructive power of terrorist organisations like Hamas, then the UK must defend our allies overseas, uphold international law and human rights, and strengthen our democracy at home, protecting civil liberties, enhancing trade union rights, and pursuing meaningful devolution of powers across our United Kingdom. As young people, this is the future we choose. We are clear-eyed about the challenges that lie ahead, but determined to play our part in realising our country's promise. And as I said on the night of my election, I hope to be a representative of that power of young people to make a difference. But we won't do it alone. I was sent to this place by a constituency that is older than the national average, but who put their faith in me to defend their interests. And that's because, in spite of the divisive politics that seeks to pit one generation against the other, in Selby and Ainsty we share our ambitions for our community and our country and are committed to realising them together. It will be the privilege of my life to play my part in this work, working in our parliaments, which I revere so deeply, to give back to my community and country, which I love so very dearly. Thank you.
Can I just say that I'm now putting a 4-minute limit on further speeches. Sheldon McCrory.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I warmly welcome the new member for Selby and Ainsty to his place, and I'm sure he's going to be an absolute asset to this area. I am a Member of Parliament in Cornwall, but many people may or may not know that I was actually born and raised in North Yorkshire, and therefore I would wonder why none of his children would want to go to school in Scarborough, because I thought it was a fabulous place to go to school. But I understand his campaign, and I admire his confidence, and I admire what he says about wanting to take away the pitting of older people to younger people. He made me feel incredibly old, because I'd actually left Scarborough to move south before he was even born, and I thought I'd lived my whole life there. Genuinely welcome you to your place. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Worcester, for bringing this debate today, and to the whole of the Education Select Committee. It is a truly important debate, and I have to say I do actually agree with most of the recommendations he made today. I think this government has made strides actually in the direction of trying to improve the quality of childcare. And as a parent who has a young child at home, although she's 9 now, it isn't that long ago that I was also taking an interest in these matters. And it's important for all working parents, and as you say, all parents that need to go into training to improve their life, that we actually do take this sector very, very seriously and see what we can do to make things better. However, sitting here on the green benches at the spring budget, I was actually incredibly proud to be part of a government that was supporting childcare and the early years, and to put it at the heart of its long-term economic strategy. It's something I've long campaigned for. With the Chancellor pledging to double the government support from 4 billion to 8 billion by 27-28, there is no doubt that we are serious about getting to grips with this issue, and I can feel I can hold my head up high at the school gates at my daughter's school, knowing that working parents in Truro and Falmouth will save up to an average of £6,500 a year on their childcare bills. This really matters to all the people in my constituency. Expanding on a predominantly private sector-led service by this scale is never going to be straightforward, which is why I also appreciate the pragmatic steps the government is taking to ensure deliverability of the promises and trying to take the sector with it. The necessary changes being made to the staff-to-child ratios, which can be controversial, is actually bringing them in line with Scotland and other countries, and I do believe it's necessary. Brings a necessary freedom to childcare providers to deliver 30 hours free childcare within the short term, knowing that perhaps we need a longer term solution. Combining this with the work the government is doing to encourage people back into the childcare sector, I'm excited to see there's a positive expansion, and this will have a positive effect on the people of Truro and Falmouth. I'm going to skip quite a lot of this because we are running out of time, but what I want to add to what the Chair of the Select Committee has already said, and perhaps it's for another day, Minister, but it's something I've campaigned on before, is I have further ambitions for the sector. Eventually, I'd like to see early years educators given the same pay and status and training as primary school teachers. It's my belief that the work done in the under fives is every bit, if not more important than what primary school teachers already do. I believe there's a cost and an upheaval to the sector to bring this into a reality, but I also believe it's far more important, and I think it would help to solve some of the issues that we have with the growing SEND sector, and I would like to see, perhaps when things are a little more calm, actually putting some real thought into doing this so that we can bring early years educators into line with primary school teachers, particularly with their training, but all the all-important status that they have in their careers. Thank you.
Stephen Furley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I warmly welcome this debate, and there may well be a few speakers from Northern Ireland. joining us today, which I think illustrates the fact that there's a real crisis in Northern Ireland where we're being left behind. The government talks a lot about so-called super parity measures in Northern Ireland, but this is an example of what is a super disparity, and it's one that urgently needs to be addressed. Obviously, we don't have a devolved assembly functioning in Northern Ireland. That's an ongoing crisis, but this is a crisis for households and for families in particular, and it needs to be urgently addressed by someone with a government authority of some means. Parents are really struggling with childcare costs, and in many cases are now greater than their mortgage costs, which we know themselves are very challenging. But that puts into context the sheer scale of the problem that's being faced. Childcare is a vital infrastructure, both social and economic. It's a form of early intervention, early education, an anti-poverty measure, and a means to improve economic activity and long-term productivity and indeed gender equality. And those are things that the government have rightly addressed. But we do need to see a childcare policy which is affordable and high quality. And we do have concerns in relation in particular to the 30 free hour scheme that's in place in England. We don't feel that is appropriate. Certainly it's not the measure we want to see in Northern Ireland. Last week my party published a paper on childcare, looking forward to what we could do differently in our region. But in particular, we're concerned that we have listened to evidence from experts, and I think this is also reflected in some of the committee's report and recommendations, that the free hours approach fails children in low-income households. It distorts the market for childcare, creating issues in terms of sustainability of supply, and also centres on parental employment rather than the child. So we need to do things differently around universal benefits, which will help to stabilise and to enhance the sector and provision. And also the sustainability of the sector is an important factor as well. And we shouldn't be in denial about the fact that actually a lot of labour from other parts of the world, including the European Union, were actually vital in sustaining the childcare sector as well, and that is also a pressure point now under the new dispensation. So this is one of the key investments that we want to make in our future, as one the government has to make, preferably through a restored assembly. But in that absence, I would call on the UK government to intervene, because the parents of Northern Ireland and the children of Northern Ireland in particular can't wait any longer for a properly resourced childcare scheme. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I congratulate my honourable friend for Worcester for securing this important debate. From the outset, I should declare that 2 of my 3 children are below school age, and we're very lucky. We have found an exceptional childminder and a superb preschool that my 2 sons enjoy every day of the school week. But from talking to many constituents and talking to many other mums and dads around my constituency, it is not always easy to find the right childminder, nursery, preschool, whichever setting that they want and that is right for their child. And when they do find it, it is even more difficult to be able to pay for it and to meet the high costs of childcare. Now, I warmly congratulate the government, and I welcomed at the time the Chancellor announced it, the massive increase in spending on subsidised childcare that through to 2025 will apply to children as young as 9 months old. But I do think, as ever, when you get a great announcement like that, the detail does need to be scrutinised significantly, and we do need to iron out any of the gremlins that might be in there. And so I principally want, with the limited time we've got this evening, to outline 2 points through the lens of a wonderful childcare setting in my constituency, the Big Top Nursery in the village of Wadston, who I visited just earlier this year. And the first relates to those funding rates that we have as of this academic year. And I would really appreciate it if the Minister could meet with me at some point in the future to go through this detail further. But if I could just inform the House that on the current rate the government will pay, compared to the rate it costs Big Top Nursery to provide that childcare, they're currently losing on a 3-year-old £1.40 an hour, equating to £14 a day, which for a child that goes to Big Top for 22 hours a week, as is a standard placement for that particular setting, the nursery is making a loss of £30.80 per week, which actually adds up across those 22 children to a £1,500 loss every single year. That is an amount of money that's not sustainable if that private nursery is going to remain in business, providing the excellent childcare that they do in the long term. So we do need to look at a way to ensure that either the nurseries are able in the future to be able to charge a top-up on that, and that the free hours, as they are badged, are actually rebadged as subsidised childcare, not creating that expectation that everything is free. Welcome that the funding is. Or there needs to be another model that recognises that that gap exists across thousands of settings across the country. And the other point I wish to very briefly mention is the way Ofsted treat preschool and childcare settings. The Big Top nursery was subject to a report that they deem deeply unfair from Ofsted. Questions to staff that were so unclear that staff had to ask the meaning of them, and the inspector then gave them a report that was not fitting of the setting, which had parents up in arms. And my challenge to the Minister is to find a way that where every single parent in a setting wants that setting to remain open, wants that setting to be where their children go, there is yet no mechanism for parents to be able to feed into it. And I challenge the Minister to fix that.
Alex Cunningham.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I start my speech this evening congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Selby and Ainstey, for a full political speech delivered with real energy, style and passion. I could have done without the age joke, though. Madam Deputy Speaker, I sat on the last Child Bill Committee 7 years ago and warned then that the plans wouldn't fly because of lack of investment. And from the member from Buckingham, we've just heard an example of that. The Minister all those years ago said the market would create itself. It didn't, and costs remain high and places available are restricted. The spring budget was an opportunity to get that right, and I welcomed announcement of a funding package as well as the extension of the subsidised 30 hours entitlement. It was a step towards helping parents and providers with affordability and sustainability concerns. But this investment was too long overdue, and more will be needed to address the structural problems in the early childhood education and care system if the funding increases are to be implemented effectively. Years and years of underfunding early years entitlements has left providers unable to invest in development and straining to survive. Children and families in my constituency and across the country deserve equal opportunities to thrive and fulfil their potential. And the new clauses I moved all those years ago in that Bill Committee are still relevant today, but they're not on the statute book. One would have meant that they were mandated to ensure that all 3- and 4-year-olds had access to high-quality, flexible and accessible early education and childcare provision, delivered by well-qualified, confident and experienced practitioners and led by an early years graduate. Sadly, that didn't happen. Childcare settings also in disadvantaged areas, they're the least likely to be of high quality, which is why I argued during that Bill Committee for the Government to have the power and the responsibility to ensure that all our children are cared for and taught by highly qualified professionals. Instead, we have a situation in which nurseries are unable to pay the wages needed to attract early years teachers because of the chronic underfunding of the free education entitlement from the Government. At the same time, universities are withdrawing their early years teacher training courses because they can't attract the applicants. It's widely recognised that effective early intervention and support is vital for improving the outcomes for children with special educational needs and disabilities. These children have the same aspirations for the future as other children, but they face more barriers. Across education, health and care, we know the needs of these children are being met and not missed. The Government, despite their failures and initiatives, still lack the ambition necessary to focus on those children whose life chances are being blighted from their earliest years to close the attainment gap. Now, I was delighted last week to hear my honourable friend, the member for Houghton and Sunderland South, set out Labour's plan for ambitious reform for childcare. A task force chaired by Sir David Bell, Labour's early years plan will ensure we have a childcare sector that works for families, children and the economy, so that high standards are not just for those families who can afford them. The Chief Executive of the London Early Years Foundation has responded to the policy and said, as children from disadvantaged backgrounds struggle to find access to quality nursery education, thereby increasing the attainment gap even further, we welcome Labour's new ambitious review to fix what is currently a broken childcare system. The Tory government has broken the childcare system, from axing huge numbers of Sure Start centres to misunderstanding how they deliver the promised provision 7 years ago. There was no plan then, there is none now. It's time for them to move on.
Deputy Speaker, I want to join in the praise of the Right Honourable Member for Worcester and his committee's report. It is completely comprehensive. We have 30 to 40 years worth of evidence about the benefits of early intervention and improving the first 1,001 days of a child's life, and I do think this report adds to that evidence base. I also believe that we all too often have a debate focused on getting mums and dads back into work, when actually the early years should always be about families, and we should never forget that for some children, good early years care, being able to go to a nursery, is a lifeline. It's a chance to escape a violent home, a chance to learn, chance to have some routine, chance to eat on a regular basis. I had quite a chaotic home life myself, and I know all too well how that can affect people. So the report's focus on the quality of early years and childhood care is really imperative, and also the focus on making sure parents have parental choice is something that we all should be striving to achieve. And on parents, let's be honest, we love our kids, but they are hard graft. Madam Deputy Speaker, I said to my daughter this morning that she needed to drink her water like mummy, and she looked me square in the eyes and said, but I don't want to be like you. My baby threw her Weetabix at me and snotted down my top, and that's before I come to this mad place and deal with thousands of emails. But parents are quite literally on the edge because it's hard work with little children, but add in mortgage level costs of childcare, the daily juggle, things going wrong. My mother-in-law has broken both of her ankles at the moment, and finding childcare, you know, all of this adds up to quite a lot of pressure, and the transition to parenthood is an excruciatingly tough period on relationships. It's one of the few stages of life where relationships are likely to break down, causing family breakdown. We shouldn't forget that. I did a really comprehensive report with Onward, which I know Onward came and gave evidence to the Select Committee. We really wanted to focus in our recommendations on families. We talked about reducing the complexity. Currently there's 8 schemes for childcare, front-loading child benefits, sharing parental leave, subsidising support in training, really focus on the whole family existence and what we know about the weird and wonderful lives of families at the moment. Just a little note, one of my girlfriends who's in the trenches with a new baby at the moment, she sent me an article about the South Korean government, who is basically subsidising mortgage rates. You're getting lower mortgage rates if you've got children because they're trying to deal with their low birth rates. This is governments all over the world really trying to think creatively, and we do have a government, the first time the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Prime Minister have put the early years at the heart of a growth agenda, and I do want to take issue with the Honourable Member for Stockton North. The Labour Party does not have a plan. They are talking about having a review and talking a bit more. Well, I put it to you on all of those benches that I put it to the Honourable Members on the other side of the benches that you have the review, you have all the details here in the committee's work in front of you. And with the relation to the workforce, we give the workforce the most precious things in our lives, yet they do feel undervalued and underpaid. There is a litany of recommendations. I look forward to the Minister's comments on the recruitment campaign. We do have to stop calling the hours free. They need to be funded or subsidised. The early years premium, for example, is at £376 per annum and £1,400 for primary schools, the tax changes that we do need to see on business rates and VAT. I could go on and on, but I won't, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Thank you. Claire Hannah.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to congratulate the member for Worcester and the new member for Selby and Ainsley for an excellent maiden speech. It reminded me that I did my maiden speech as an MLA some years ago on childcare, so I hope he is slightly more successful than I am at having his political aims achieved. Members across the Chamber have made excellent points about the chronic failure to think big on the issue of childcare and the series of minor interventions and tinkering that we've had on a sector that is struggling under the weight of very complex funding streams, interventions that have increased the demand for the sector with various free hours promises made without any meaningful work on the supply side, and therefore not really adding up to any sort of a solution. The UK does have, we've heard, the highest childcare costs in the OECD, and Northern Ireland is falling even further behind that, with, as my colleague pointed out, successive executives really failing to take sufficient interest in this issue. The crisis isn't new. As I say, I was addressing it as an MLA back in 2016 and subsequently established an all-party group which has driven quite substantial policy change and ideas, but when government is down more than it is up, it is difficult to implement those things. There's been quite a bit of progress in terms of people's understanding of the issue, and I credit groups like Employers for Childcare and Melted Parents in Northern Ireland and the Federation of Small Business, who have correctly framed this issue as one of equality in terms of gender in the workplace and of outcomes for children, but also fundamentally as an economic issue, and one that is crucial to tackling Northern Ireland's chronically low productivity and high levels of economic inactivity. My SDLP colleagues in the Assembly set out a plan in January of this year for a two-stage approach, a rescue plan to address the acute cost of living pressures that families were facing in terms of gargantuan childcare bills and growing that, as others have said, dwarf housing and other costs, and also to address the recruitment and retention crisis that the sector was facing as well. And we also had a longer term strategy that would borrow from successful and usually social democratic economies around the world. We noted at that time the inverted pyramid of funding, which means that 10 times more is spent on post-primary education than on early years education, despite all that we know about the impact of the first 1,000 days in a child's life. So the necessary fixes to childcare, nobody's pretending this is a simple issue, but it starts from the principle that this is a common good, that having children, yes, maybe the meaningful thing in our lives. And I think back to being asked by an indignant morning radio presenter, was this not just chronic self-interest on my part because I had big childcare bills? But it starts from an acceptance that as well as being a meaningful experience, parenting is necessary for the replenishment of the human race and the workforce of the future, and therefore that providing for children's care is a matter for all of us. It starts from the knowledge that more equal societies do better, and as I say, that means affording everybody equal opportunity to thrive in the workplace, and also understanding that giving children better and more equal starts in life is good for the public purse and society throughout their lifetime.
Danny Kruger.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and my thanks to the Chairman of the Select Committee for the debate. And I want to also add my congratulations to the new member for Selby and Ainsley. He gave an absolutely tremendous speech, full of patriotism and love of community. It's just what we need to hear from the Labour Party. So I'm very much welcome. He's an asset already to this place, and I look forward to the contribution he will make. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a very good thing that the government is committing such a significant amount of money to the early years. Normally, I don't want to just boast about government spending as if it's a sort of proxy for good work on its own, but in this case, doubling the contribution that is being made from 4 billion to 8 billion is an absolutely tremendous demonstration of the government's belief in early years and in family policy. So I welcome it, and to echo the point made by my honourable friend from Stroud, she mentioned the importance of the birth rate and of fertility, the great challenge that the Western countries around the world face, and our country is going to have to grapple with, and I think it's very important that we do put money into families. My anxiety, though, is about the method of implementation, and particularly the effect on preschools. And when we're talking about institutions which themselves only deliver maybe 30 hours of education, of childcare per week, the effect of the increase in the free hours, which are not free hours, the funded hours, is to effectively make the state the sole buyer of those places at those preschools. So effectively we're nationalising these schools and making them clients of government. And that might be okay, nothing wrong with that in principle, except for the fact that government is traditionally not very good at setting prices. And if, as we see in Wiltshire, the price that is set is way below the actual amount of money that it costs to run the preschool, then we have a problem. We're distorting the market to the point of destruction. And I'm very concerned about the effect, particularly on preschools. Of course, nurseries, which run through the year, are able to cross-subsidise, charge private places as well, are able to do better. And so I'm afraid the effect might well be that we are driving parents into nursery provision, often lower quality, and out of the preschool sector. And I just want to quote quickly from a letter I received and I went to see them the other day, Little Dragons preschool in my constituency of Devizes, and they said this: the current direction of government policy is towards the state-funded impersonal supervision of children by profit-motivated businesses from the age of 2. I'm not saying that's all nurseries, but that is a concern. So I just want to make a very probably an oversimplistic suggestion to the Minister. We massively overcomplicate the provision of childcare and the way the funding works, to the great distress of families and, of course, of these providers. We're now putting £8 billion a year into early years. That's £6,500 per family. Why don't we just give that money, by some means or other, directly to families to use as they see fit? So particularly in the very early years, up to the age of 2, I think that could just be in the form of cash. I mean, a direct entitlement to parents to spend as they see fit, whether in formal or informal settings. And then as they go into the 3 and 4 years, through a voucher system, which can be redeemed at any registered institution. And of course, it should be allowed to be topped up. I think it's wrong that there should be a complete monopoly of state funding in these institutions. Why can't a charity like the Little Dragons charge a little bit extra if it needs to? Of course, it would also provide a free place to a child or to a family that couldn't afford any additional fee. But they should be allowed to work that out themselves with their community. And of course, there is quite a significant universal credit childcare entitlement now that should enable people to support that cost. So I think we can be more imaginative and more flexible and more respectful of the choices that parents themselves want to make, both for the sake of their own family finances and the way they want to live their lives, but in order also to sustain a healthy and vibrant early years sector. Thank you.
Tyrone Owatemi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to start by thanking the Honourable Member for Worcester for securing this important debate, but also to welcome my honourable friend, the Member for Selby and Ainsty, to his place. I'd like to commend him for his outstanding maiden speech, and just to say that he's made his constituents very proud tonight. Madam Deputy Speaker, throughout this cost of living crisis, countless nurseries in my constituency of Coventry North West have struggled to keep up with ever-rising prices. At Georgie Porgy Preschool, Katie, the director, fought to keep her nursery open after her utility bills tripled. She was lucky. She was able to save her business, but countless other nurseries across the country have been forced to close. You only need to look in the face of the nursery workers who've lost their jobs, who've lost their security, to see that our current system is failing. The inadequate levels of state funding offered per child leaves nurseries to struggle through with insufficient funding and inadequate support. This system not only fails our nurseries, but also parents and carers that use them. Closing nurseries means less space for their children, packed waiting lists and longer morning commutes. But a financially struggling nursery almost always means a rise in fees. And so it's not surprising that Britain now has the third most expensive childcare system in the world, with more than 1 in 5 households spending over half their income on it. For women who wish to return to work soon after the birth of their child, these costs crush their aspirations. 3 in 4 mothers say that childcare fees are so significant financially that the best option is to stop working altogether. And I know, speaking to many families on my doorstep, this is an issue that many of them raise with me. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, our system hinders the opportunities and ultimately freedom of women who wish to return to work, and we cannot continue to allow this to happen.
I strongly support my honourable friend, the member for Houghton and Sunderland South, whose plan is to have an extensive review of the system. I believe that any reform that we implement must move us closer to the examples of countries like Finland, like Estonia, where there is a better funded, expanded system of care. And as the Shadow Secretary of State has suggested, this should involve empowering local councils to deliver their own childcare, filling the gaps in providers. But it should also include more substantial grants being offered to nurseries, which could stabilise the industry, whilst potentially also adopting a Finnish-style tier system where each family's fees are far more closely linked to their income. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, whilst I welcome the Government's plan to expand childcare provisions to children as young as 9 months old, these changes are simply not enough to tackle the challenges in our system. If we seriously wish to give our businesses and parents a system that works, we have to go for far more substantial reforms. Stick and plaster solutions just won't work. So I urge this House not to turn a blind eye to our childcare system, but to press ahead for the meaningful long-term changes that this country desperately needs. Thank you, Speaker.
I will call Jim Shannon, but I do need him to sit down at 44 so I can bring in the front bench. Jim Shannon.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much to speak in this debate. First of all, congratulate the honourable member for Selby and Ainsbury for his excellent speech. Two quick women in my life that make a big difference. Sandra, my wife, married to her for 36 years. She brought up my 3 sons. She looked after them. She reared them. She's the person who takes the credit. Not only has she moved on now, she's now the grandmother as well and looks after 6 grandchildren. A 5 a.m. stint in the morning and then numerous stints in the afternoon. The reason why I mention that is because that's what's about childcare and the early years. And for my wife, without that, a slip of my boys and their wives could not survive. They couldn't afford to go to work. And what was easily afforded 10 years ago is not afforded the same today. That's why parents are working beyond 65 years of age. And I just wanted to make the comment, and I think it's important to do so for my debate and my contribution. I don't think we talk enough about support for early years and children without highlighting the government's determination not to raise child benefit thresholds since 2013. From 2013 until now, the average price in the UK of CPI has been 25.9%. Now, how can any mother and father looking to provide childcare in early years be able to afford that? They just quite simply can't. And if the boss gives them an extra £2,000 in their wages, it doesn't count because they don't get the benefit because of the threshold. So I very much put the case on record. And with the 25% increase in CPI, the family paid £98.15 per week for 25 hours of childcare in 2013. They pay now £285.31 per week. I mean, that's massive. And for any parent, any mum and dad with a family to rear, there's just no way that anyone could do that. And if they earn £50,000, they simply don't get child tax credit to help them. These are people in ordinary jobs, trying their best to make their mortgage payment, heat their homes, educate their children, and not with one penny, with respect, from government over their child benefit. For this reason, the uplift to the threshold is so important. I'll quickly give you an example of my parliamentary aide, second woman, and not the second woman in my life, but a woman who's a very, very much part of it. It's all going to come in all the roles, you know. She's my parliamentary aide, she writes all the speeches, okay. Now, just give me that. She leaves work, collects the children from childminders, does her homeworks, prepares the meals, gets their lunches ready, makes sure they're healthy, as they aren't allowed any unhealthy food until Friday, which means peeling carrot sticks, making fruit salads, cubing cheese, does the housework, putting the washing, puts the children to bed, making sure they can spend at least 20 minutes. The point I'm making is that the pressure on them today is phenomenal. And I finish with this. We must do so now before a generation of families are submerged in debt and stress and they can't recover from it. We need help with childcare, help with finances, help to manage expectation, and the message must be sent to working families as well as those single parent families. We see you and we will support you. And that's what this debate's about tonight.
Shadow Minister Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to congratulate the Honourable Member for Worcester, the Chair of the Select Committee, on securing this important debate today and on the committee's excellent report on support for childcare and the early years. I'm grateful to all of the honourable members who have spoken today, and I'd particularly like to congratulate my new honourable friend, the member for Selby and Ainsty, on a truly outstanding maiden speech. He has shown what a brilliant champion for his constituents he will be on the local, national and international issues that shape their lives, and we are so glad to have him with us in this place. There isn't time this evening to mention specifically all of the other contributions that we have had, but we have heard from honourable members across this House about the eye-watering childcare costs facing families across the country. We've heard about the deficit in government funding for the so-called free hours. We have heard about the recruitment and retention problems faced by early years providers. We have heard about a sector that is under unbearable pressure at present. Children's earliest years are crucial to their development and life chances. Many of the factors which contribute to the education attainment gap are already present by the time children start school. Early years education and childcare should be focused on ensuring families have the early support they need to give their child the best start to life and education, while also delivering affordable childcare to help to enable parents to work. The current hours-based model for childcare funding is fundamentally not working for providers or for families. For families, it is inaccessible and complex and does not reflect the reality of their lives and working patterns or deliver affordability. At the same time, 4,800 providers were forced to close their doors last year due to rising costs, so the current model is not working for them either. Parents have seen year-on-year rising costs and growing childcare deserts where they cannot access the childcare they need. There are now 2 children for every Ofsted registered childcare place across England, creating a barrier to parents and particularly women taking on employment. We are seeing women leaving the workforce for the first time in decades, priced out by the costs of childcare. And it is parents of children with special educational needs and disabilities who find it the hardest of all to find childcare places. This government has delivered a triple whammy: the most expensive childcare in Europe, an unviable financial model for providers, and significant childcare deserts. A colossal failure of both families and the skilled professionals who work in the early years. And the policies that the government has brought forward in response to this crisis, after 13 years of failure and only because of intense pressure after the Chancellor spoke a year ago about the need to expand the labour market but omitted to mention the role of childcare once, will not fix these problems. Additional funding is welcome, but pumping it into a system which is already broken will not deliver the change families need. Childcare providers are clear that as things currently stand, they cannot deliver the expanded entitlement. The findings of a survey of 800 providers by the Early Years Alliance found that only 20% of providers who currently offer places to 2-year-olds plan to deliver additional places under the expanded entitlement. Another 33% said that they were unsure whether they would deliver places under the new scheme. This is because the government has no plan for expanding the workforce to deliver an expanded entitlement in a sector already struggling to recruit and retain staff. No plan for premises for which there are quite rightly strict requirements in the early years sector. And no vision for quality in the early years. Childcare must be about more than just minding children while their parents work. It should be able to provide every child with high-quality early years education. A Labour government will be driven by our mission to break down the barriers to opportunity at every stage, including by boosting child development, with 500,000 more children hitting the early learning goals by 2030. Labour is determined that childcare offers more flexibility, better availability and high standards for children and families. We will draw upon the best practice internationally to drive an ambitious and coherent programme of reform with higher standards for early education, better availability, stronger regulation of the financial sustainability of providers, and a clear strategy for the childcare workforce. We have commissioned former Ofsted Chief Inspector Sir David Bell to undertake a full review of the early years sector and help to develop the detail of our early years plan. A Labour government will work with the early years sector to build capacity, including removing the legislative barriers to local authorities opening new provision. We will also work with the sector to ensure there is a plan for the early years workforce which offers more opportunities for high-quality training and recognition for the skilled work of early years practitioners. And we will also recognise that childcare doesn't end when children start school. We will deliver funded breakfast clubs in every primary school to help parents work, provide opportunities for children to play, learn and socialise at the start of the school day, and make sure that every child is able to access a healthy, nutritious breakfast and start the school day ready to learn. Madam Deputy Speaker, this government's record is the most expensive childcare in Europe, childcare providers closing their doors and childcare deserts across the country. They have always regarded children as an afterthought, and in doing so they have failed children and their families. After 13 years, their sticking plaster solutions won't fix things now. A Labour government will deliver a childcare system that works for children and their families from the end of parental leave to the end of primary school. We put children at the heart of our programme of government from 1997 to 2010, and we will do so again.
Minister David Johnston.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I firstly congratulate my honourable friend, the Chair of the Education Select Committee. He's helped the development of our policy in this area, and his committee produced a very good report which we have responded to. I'm also very grateful to him for relinquishing his time so that I've got more time to respond to some of the points of this debate. Can I also congratulate the Honourable Member for Selby and Ainsty on giving his maiden speech. I thought he delivered it with aplomb, and he gave us a lovely portrait of his constituency, which I visited on the losing side a number of times earlier in the year, and I've no doubt he'll be a strong advocate for the people of his constituency. Can I also take this opportunity to pay tribute to the hard work and dedication of our early years and childcare workforce, because through challenges from the pandemic to the rising costs of living, they've worked tirelessly to provide care that allows children to flourish. Extensive evidence makes clear, and a number of members have touched on this, that high-quality early years education has a positive effect on the cognitive, behavioural and social development of children in both the short and long term. Building a strong foundation for every child is at the heart of this government's agenda, and it's critical to enabling children to succeed both at school and later in life. That's true for all children, but members will know I have a particular interest in disadvantaged children, having run charities for them before I became an MP, and it's especially important to try and ensure that they get the right support in their earliest years, as my honourable friend for Stroud touched on in her excellent speech. High-quality childcare is also fundamental to building a strong economy, allowing parents to enter employment, take on more hours, or choose from a wider range of jobs. And that is particularly important for mothers whose employment rates and pay have been and continue to be disproportionately impacted by having children. This government has a strong track record of supporting parents with the cost of childcare, supporting disadvantaged children and ensuring childcare is high quality. In September 2010, we extended the 3- and 4-year-old entitlement that parents typically take as 15 hours per week for 38 weeks of the year. In 2013, we introduced 15 free hours a week for disadvantaged 2-year-olds. In 2017, the 3- and 4-year-old entitlement was doubled to 30 hours per week. And now, recognising that childcare is one of the biggest costs facing working families today, this government is making the largest single investment in childcare ever. This investment, an additional £4.1 billion, will double the amount being spent by the government on childcare, so that by September 2025, all eligible working parents will be able to claim 30 hours of free childcare, and I will come back to the word free in a minute, from when their child is 9 months old until they start school. And as members know, this will be rolled out in stages, so that from April, eligible parents of 2-year-olds will be able to access 15 free hours. From September, eligible parents of children from 9 months upwards will be able to do likewise. And then the full 30-hour entitlement will come in from September 2025. Very briefly,
And I mean, we're all going to welcome additional funding within childcare and expansion of services, but surely we need a very clear workforce plan if we're actually going to deliver all this.
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Member because I'm about to come on to workforce. But just before I do that, alongside this, we want to increase the supply of wraparound care to enable families to work more or flexible hours. So we're investing £289 million start-up funding to provide local authorities with funding to set up wraparound provision from 8 to 6 p.m. in their local areas. And local authorities are more broadly critical to this delivery of the expansion of childcare. So we're working closely with them to understand the challenges they face, to ensure they've got sufficient places to meet parental demand, and will shortly be appointing a contractor to support them in this work. Now, there have been some key themes in this debate, beginning with funding rates. By 2027-28, we expect to be spending more than £8 billion every year on childcare. We've already increased the funding paid to nurseries for the existing entitlements by £204 million this year, rising to £288 million next year. That means that the national average rate for 3- and 4-year-olds has gone up to £5.62, and for 2-year-olds it's gone up to £7.95 an hour from £6, which is a third increase. Now, these rates are informed by a survey of more than 10,000 providers that we do to understand the funding pressures on them. That said, I'm very happy to meet both my honourable friend, the member for Buckingham, who raised issues in his constituency. There has been a 10.1% increase for providers there, but I'm happy to have that discussion with him, and also my honourable friend, the member for Devizes, where there's been a 6.8% increase. But I'm happy to continue that discussion. On quality and flexibility questions, firstly, it's worth noting we have some of the highest quality childcare in the world, with 96% of early years settings rated good or outstanding. But we are working with the sector to increase flexibility and remove unnecessary burdens. In September, as my honourable friend, the member for Truro and Falmouth touched on, we changed the ratios for 2-year-olds. We're pushing landlords to be more flexible and allow childminders to operate on their premises. And we will shortly announce our response to the recent consultation with the sector about the EYFS, where we're hoping to make a series of changes to help practitioners more easily do their jobs while maintaining higher standards. Now, on workforce, delivering expansion is going to need a significant boost to the workforce. So it's key for us to be able to encourage more people into this sector, to raise the status, as my honourable friend touched on. In the new year, we will launch a big recruitment campaign to encourage people to consider working in a nursery school or childminder. We're expanding the early years professional development programme. We've already got nearly 25,000 people undertaking apprenticeships in this sector, but we're looking at accelerated apprenticeships and degree apprenticeships, and running early years skills boot camps from next year as well to try and get more people into it. We've also got starting shortly a startup grant scheme for childminders, which will provide £600 for those registering with Ofsted and £1,200 for those registering with a childminder agency. Now, very briefly, to touch on some other points made by the Chair of the Select Committee, on business rates, our funding rates do take into account business rate costs, and in the autumn statement, the government announced a freeze to the business rates multiplier, which is a tax cut worth £9.3 billion over 5 years. Small business rates relief exists, and obviously so does relief for charities, but I'm happy to look at the extreme cases that he set out in his speech. On tax-free childcare, he's right to flag this, because this can save parents up to £2,000 per year on the cost of childcare, or up to £4,000 for children with disabilities, and we're trying to drive up the take-up of that through our Childcare Choices website. And then on people in education and training, a big part of this offer is to try and encourage people into work. Students are eligible for the universal 15 hours for 3- and 4-year-olds, and the 33 hours if they meet the income criteria, and there's a childcare grant and parent learning allowance as well, but I have heard the point that he makes. I think I have covered most of the points that people have made. A number of members from Northern Ireland, obviously this issue is devolved in Northern Ireland. I will just say that next week I'm chairing the British-Irish Council, which is on childcare, and I'm sure we're going to discuss childcare in both Northern Ireland and in the Republic. I think I've covered most of Labour's commentary. I would be a lot more amenable to criticism from the Labour Party if the Labour Party had any policy whatsoever in this area. But as the Labour Party does not, and all it's done is commission a task force to tell it what to think, I will close the debate there, Madam Deputy.